Hello everyone. The burning question on every investor's mind today is, what happens if the oil boils to $120? What happens if the whole Middle East boils? What happens if everyone gets into a war? Well, of course, if all of these were to happen together, markets would fall. Then, the next question is, what is the probability of these events? Well, it is very hard to say what is the exact probability of these events. But as things stand today, the probability of these events is not zero. At the same time, we would not attach a very high probability of these events happening either. That's because we currently assume that most of the countries across the world would understand geopolitics, although limited to their own regions, but they will understand what can it mean for a longer time period for their economies as a whole. There obviously exists a probability of this escalating, but that does not mean it has to escalate. What if it escalates? What happens then? What if oil goes to 120 as people are talking or speculating or apprehensive about? Well, if all of that were to happen together, markets will have a 10 to 15% kind of downsides on the index itself. If that were to happen, what do? You get panicked, you panic more, you sell. Well, no. History suggests if that were to happen, you go and buy. But what if that were not to happen? Then what would happen to our investments? Would we miss out on the opportunities that were existent in front of us? Well, what we believe is, even if that were not to happen, it's not that tomorrow the market is going to run away. The reason being, you see the macro clouds today, with the US 10-year at around 5%, inflation still being resilient, the economy is still doing pretty well, it is kind of easy to say that the macro is not the best right now. And when the macro is not the best, it does mean that the markets will not necessarily make the new highs just then. In a muffled up macro, what should we do? In a muffled up macro, we should wait, and we should wait for the opportunity to enter the markets. What happens if 2024 elections go not as per what the market thinks? There can be downside, but not a sustainable downside. All of these means that from now on to maybe May, June, or till the whole geopolitics gets cleared up, we will get opportunities to invest in the market. If the dreaded fears of the whole Middle East going to wars doesn't come true, it will be a sigh of relief, but the markets will not be back on a path of rollicking returns just yet, just because the other macro of the US 10-year, of the Indian inflation, of the US inflation and the growth slowing down still remains. So then we go back to earnings. That is what we understand the most, and that is what leads the markets eventually. Earnings are still intact in India. That's the brightest spot in the whole world. Earnings expectation of Nifty is around 1100 in FY25. So the expectation of earnings, unless they have to be cut, the markets are all right. On every decline, we would assume that people should want to invest more. However, there can be a knee-jerk reaction if all of these come together. At that time, people, instead of doing an SIP, should do lump sum. But till then, till the macro clears, till the geopolitics clears, the Indian micro, which is still sustaining very strong, which is in its earnings, people should keep nibbling in the markets, because you will never be able to time when it corrects and when it turns and when the whole geopolitics clears up. However, I again caution that if all the issues come together at one time, there may be a knee-jerk. But if there is a knee-jerk, we would invest people to invest lump sum. Till then, keep investing in small parts like an SIP and keep bearing the fruits of earnings story of the Indian country for the next decade or so. Thank you.